Welcome back. The Gallo Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Dave Hughes here. And joining us in the studio now, he has been caffeinated and should be ready to go. He's the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Douglas Carswell joins us now. Douglas, how you doing this morning?
Happy New Year, Dave. Happy New Year, Mississippi. Really looking forward to the new legislative session starting in a few days.
Yeah, well, we don't have long to wait. It kicks off on Tuesday, and as you know, at the beginning of the Mississippi legislative session, you have a very busy couple of weeks because it's a very short deadline to get bills introduced. And you're kind of trying to help at the Center for Public Policy because you've laid out what you're calling a blueprint for some of the things that you'd like to see. And I got to tell you, I like this list. Douglas, you got some good stuff on here.
Well, thank you. I mean, Mississippi is an overwhelmingly conservative state. People in Mississippi overwhelmingly vote conservative. We don't always get conservative policies that reflect that. So we thought we would publish this blueprint on behalf of Mississippi voters saying these are the 10 steps that lawmakers could take to make Mississippi not only properly conservative, but actually more successful. If we do these things, the Mississippi economy will grow, and Mississippi will be a place where young people don't want to leave. It'll be the place where young people want to move to. So we hope that they will adopt some of these ideas.
Well, I notice you've got three. I've got the list of 10 things in front of me, and 3 of them deal with parental choice, which has been a hot button topic for a while now that we just can't seem to push any of it across the finish line. Is this the year?
Well, we made steps last year. Last year we passed school funding reform, which means that every child in Mississippi in the public school system now has a dedicated account, if you like, a dedicated budget, their money. Now we want to make sure they can take that money, their money, to a public school of their choice. So we're really pushing, number one priority is public-to-public school choice, allowing children in the system who are unhappy with what they've got to move to a different public school of their choice, to take their share of the tax dollars. So we've come up with a plan to do that. We've come up with a bill to do that. We're very excited. We think, I mean, in a sense, it would do what number 2 on our list seeks to achieve. Thanks to a bill sponsored and pushed by the governor, Tate Reeves, last year, military families now have public-to-public school choice. We think that right should be extended to all families in Mississippi.
I think you're exactly right. And we do this every time you and I get on this topic, but I want to do it again because you can't say it enough. The leading argument against parental choice, parental school choice, is that, well, then all the kids will pull out of this school district and be in this one instead, and then what happens to that school district?
And there are 2 contradictory arguments that we hear. One is that if you allow – the first is that, everything's fine and dandy, everyone loves their school, and there's no need for this. The second argument the same people against school choice say is that, well, if you allow parental choice, if you allow public-to-public school choice, people will all leave. Well, both can't be right. Either things are great, in which case, if things are fine, you've no need to fear people wanting to move. We think, though, that actually it's parents and families, it's mums and dads who are better at deciding what's right for their child. And family circumstances are different. Children are different. There may be hundreds of different reasons why one family might prefer one option to another. We think the best way of doing education is having parent power. And the states around us have adopted this. Alabama, Arkansas, and now Louisiana. All of those states now have universal school choice. This isn't universal school choice. This is public-to-public school choice. But we think it should be the number one priority for this session.
Well, one thing that I think flies under the radar on this, it seems like all of our arguments come down to choice, to rights, to, the freedom to make decisions that can better the life of you and your family, whether it be education, whether it be economic, whatever. It seems like at the base, that's the root of a lot of these things.
Choice is the great driver of progress. I mean, think about it this way. Think back. Some of your listeners will be as old as I am and will be able to imagine what it was like when the telecom sector in America was regulated, when government regulated. If telephones were regulated by the government, it would be like back in the old days. There'd be a waiting list to get a telephone. because of deregulation, because of choice, because of customer power, we now have this wonderful world in which each of us is able to walk around with a cell phone in our hand for a fraction of what it costs to have an old landline. That's what choice does. It doesn't just do it to telephones and telecoms. It could do it to education. Everything that choice touches, it transforms for the better. We haven't applied school choice to education, and that's one of the reasons why Mississippi isn't doing as well as other states, frankly, because we don't have the education system that young people and their families deserve.
Well, and if you hear what Douglas is saying and giving a very apt description of it as usual, and it sounds an awful lot like free market concepts, well, that's because it's the same thing, basically.
Yeah. I mean, choice lifts standards for everyone, and everyone benefits. Now, the arguments we'll get against this is that actually, it's not needed, that actually things are fine and dandy, and we'll hear all of those arguments. But just remember, often the people making these arguments are people who are direct beneficiaries of a system that spends an enormous amount of money but doesn't put it in the classroom, doesn't put it in your child's classroom. It puts it in the hands of the fat cat bureaucrats in the education system. So, of course, there are going to be some fat cat bureaucrats who are against change. But actually, we think the education system in Mississippi should be run for the benefit of Mississippi families and Mississippi taxpayers, not for fat cat bureaucrats who don't want change.
Well, I agree with your assessment. If everything is fine, nobody's going to move, and it's not going to have any effect. Let's put it out there and see what happens. I think that's exactly right. Another big topic, tax cuts, eliminating the state income tax. Let's talk about that for a second.
Well, the second tier of change we want in Mississippi is less government, and Mississippi needs lower taxes. We already made huge strides with a bill, again, spearheaded by the previous speaker, Gunn, and the governor, Tate Reeves, to reduce the state income tax to a flat 4%. That's hugely important. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we're seeing all this inward investment coming into Mississippi. Tax cuts work. But we need to go further. We've got a huge budget surplus, a very healthy budget surplus. That means the state of Mississippi is taking more in taxes than it's spending. We think, actually, rather than increasing spending, we should reduce the amount of tax that the government of Mississippi takes. So we're really excited to see this on the top of the agenda for some of our key state leaders. We think there are smart ways of doing this, and there are dumb ways of doing it. We're in behind the scenes advocating for the smart ways of doing it. I think the really smart way of doing it is to make sure that tax cuts are affordable, to make sure that you do it in stages. You don't end up overstretching it so that you end up having to raise taxes again. So there's a smart way of doing it, and I'm really excited. I think we could see further steps towards eventual income tax elimination in Mississippi.
Well, and I know in this world of I want everything the way I want it and I want it now, it's a little hard to understand the concept sometimes, but easing into it like we're doing, and like you said, there's already been talk. I think we're going to see more progress in this session. Easing our way into it is the way to make it stick and to make it last.
And the way to guarantee affordable tax cuts is to cut government spending. Now, look at what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are going to do to the federal government. They've set up the so-called DOGE, I think it is, commission, where they're looking to cut government spending by a vast amount at a federal level. If they can reduce government spending by $1 trillion a year at a federal level, I think we can shave a few $100 million off government spending here in Mississippi. Think of all the bureaucracy and the commissions and the boards and the duplication that you've got in the state of Mississippi government machinery. Downtown Jackson is full of government offices. We could slim that down a lot. We could merge back office functions in some of the government departments. We could remove some of the duplication. Things like IT procurement, you don't need to have every government department doing it individually and separately. And if you created those savings, you could pass that on to the taxpayer. So I think we could reduce the size of government and have tax cuts, and the sums would add up.
Well, and I think, taking it outside the borders for a second, but we have a fantastic laboratory case for what this kind of drastic cutting can lead to when you get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy. You know what I'm talking about with Malai. He's a success story down there right now.
Do you know, it's about a year ago when Malai, the president of Argentina, the chainsaw-wielding man, took over. Everyone, all the experts, all the clever people, all the kind of people who say we can't afford tax cuts in Mississippi were quick to say he's going to fail. A year on, he's achieving a miracle. He's dramatically cut government spending. He's reduced the number of bureaucrats. He is loathed and hated by the kind of fat cat bureaucrats that will complain when we cut taxes in Mississippi. But you know what? We should run our state for the benefit of the people, not for the vested interest. So Argentina shows how to do it. We don't need to be as dramatic as that, but it's certainly a role model for us.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth in the old adage that sometimes the best way to gauge how successful you're being at a good cause is by who's mad at you over it.
Tell me about it. The more they complain, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. I got a friend of mine, an author, his phrase, Joshua Lissick, says all the time, bad reviews from bad people are good reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope to get a few of those this session.
We will continue with Douglas Carswell. We got a lot more on the list we need to get to next. The matters, we have the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, Douglas Carswell, in the studio with us. And, you know, I feel like sometimes, Douglas, we keep talking about the same thing over and over and over, but that's how you get things done, isn't it?
Well, you got to push. And I think, actually, you've also got to realize why we've not made progress on some of the things that we're trying to push for. And that is, I think, because sometimes we haven't pushed hard enough. People in Mississippi want to be nice to each other, and sometimes there's a tendency when you're in the Capitol under the dome to want to be nice. But I think actually you've got to be prepared to push. And Morton Blackwell, the great conservative campaigner, said that in politics nothing moves without a push. So I think we've got to push, and sometimes, frankly, we've got to stop playing nice. If there are people in the political process who claim to be conservative but who stand in the way of good conservative policy, well, we need to call them out, and we're going to be prepared to do that this session.
Well, and I've always very firmly subscribed to the rule that if no one hates what you're doing, you're not doing anything very important.
Well, if you're getting flack, you're over the zone. And there are one or two zones where, frankly, we need to be over. It I think, would be outrageous if any self-styled conservative was to block parental power and parental choice. And similarly with tackling DEI, I'm sad to say that for 3 years in a row now, we've seen some Republicans in the Senate maneuver, presumably at the behest of lobbyists for universities, to prevent anti-DEI legislation. Well, we're championing anti-DEI legislation. We think that it's time to end the practice of using tax dollars to promote divisive, radical ideology in our public universities. I think one of the reasons probably why Donald Trump won is because middle America is fed up with DEI. And I think we need to see some action taken this session by our lawmakers to tackle DEI in our public universities.
Do you think that there's a little political cover provided, state, federal level, whatever, by the fact that we are seeing more and more major corporations now come out and dissolve their DEI departments and do away with the practice of DEI? That gives them maybe a little bit of political cover?
Well, I think those companies are responding to market forces, to their customers. Middle America is fed up with this. Families, for example, are not going to scrimp and save dollars in order to go and have a family holiday at Disney World, only to be given woke lectures to their children. You know, people are responding to market pressures. But I think politicians need to respond to that consumer pressure too. The ordinary voters of Mississippi who vote conservative are not going to want to know that their tax dollars are being used to promote radical ideology at Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Now, every time we've pushed forward for a bill, the lobbyists employed by universities have crushed the bill, presumably by offering lawmakers free tickets to football games. But I don't think that's going to wash anymore. Frankly, if you work for a university and you're listening to this, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to accept the need for anti-DEI legislation. Work with us, not against us, because we will call out those who intentionally maneuver to kill legislation in committee. It's not going to wash anymore to say this died in committee. If you block legislation, you will become famous, if not infamous, and we will work to achieve that.
Well, and that's something that I think has been almost hate to use this phrase, part of the problem during the past 4 years is that a lot of people have kind of flown under the radar with what they're doing.
Absolutely. And I'll be self-critical. Organizations like ours haven't been willing to actually ruffle feathers. We're not just going to ruffle feathers. If need be, we're going to pluck out the feathers. We're not going to allow self-styled conservatives to prevent anti-DEI legislation. This is too important. I appreciate as an outsider that the United States is founded on this incredible principle that all people are created equal. This divisive ideology is destroying that vision of America, destroying the founding concept of America. And if they get away with it, they will turn America into just another country. I think America's too precious to allow them to do that. We've got to do our bit in Mississippi. We've got to stop DEI being promoted on the public dollar in our public universities. It shouldn't be controversial. So we're backing legislation to do this. I hope people in universities will work with us. But, we're going to make this happen, whatever.
I really, if you succeed in plucking out enough feathers, I want to have you back on the show to hold up a plucked chicken and say, "Behold, a DEI-free man." Little philosophy humor there. Now, sorry, I had to put that in. The DEI,
we don't want to take this metaphor too far.
No, it's probably a step and a half too far already. The anti-DEI is huge, and it also plays into number 7 on your list, which is a reform of university accreditation.
Yeah. If you start talking to the people who run the universities, the faculty and the administrators, they will soon start to cite the accreditation system as the sort of the reason why they have to do a lot of this stuff. So let's change the university accreditation system. We need to have what Florida has, where there are multiple ways a university can be accredited. There are competing accreditation systems. Tackle that, because it's the accreditation system that often embeds this woke ideology in the system. So if necessary, let's pass a law that changes that. It can be done.
And I want to make sure that I point out again, that one, a perfect example. Even the DEI issue is all about giving people more choices, giving people more freedom to find their own way through things. That's how success happens.
Yeah, and look, this is not about restricting teaching and beliefs. If you use your private dollars, teach what you like, believe what you like, think what you like, advocate for what you like. But if you're going to use public money, I think you have a responsibility to the public that you're not promoting divisive ideology that pits American against American.
Repealing the Certificate of Need laws. You're about to get me fired up, Douglas, because we've needed to do that for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare in Mississippi is, let's be honest, it's not great. And often the debate becomes a question of, should we hose federal dollars at it? And I don't want to get into that. There are good people on both sides of the Medicaid expansion argument. I don't want to get into that. But one thing we could do is remove these intentionally restrictive laws known as the Certificate of Need laws. Now, what these laws say is that if you want to come into the healthcare market or expand provision or even change ownership or even invest above a certain amount in new healthcare facilities, you need a permit. And the people who decide whether or not you're allowed to get that permit are your competitors. And it's a deliberately and intentionally rigged market. It'd be a little bit like if you needed to get a permit from Papa John's to expand and open a new pizza restaurant. It's intentionally restrictive. We need to remove these intentionally restrictive Certificate of Need laws. And if we did that, we would get better healthcare at a lower cost. People wouldn't have to pay as much for the healthcare they get. It would be good for everyone, apart from a few, lobbyists who've been lobbying for 30 years to maintain the status quo.
Once again, more choice, free market. I'm telling you, it's a theme running through your entire list here.
It's been a theme in this country since 1776, and I can tell you it works. It's why America works.
The debanking bill to defund financial freedom, that is a problem that I think has flown under a lot of people's radar, but it is a real thing that is happening.
It is, particularly under the previous administration, but the powers are there that allow big government and big banks to collude to, in fact, deny people liberty. You don't need to pass a law to restrict people's freedom of speech these days. You can debank them. That means you can basically say that we're not going to provide banking services. And this has happened, and this has been quite widespread in America. People who've had opinions that are unfashionable or aren't liked, or that the ruling party of the day, it could be right as well as left, don't like, they debank people. And we think this has to stop. We think that in America you should be free to say and think what you want and not have to fear that you'll be debanked. Incidentally, debanking is not just a problem in America. It's in other parts of the world we've seen this problem. Technology means that I think you need a debanking legislation to ensure that people are free to say and do and think what they want to say and do and think as Americans without the bureaucratic administrative state colluding with banks to punish you.
And restoring the ballot initiative. Can you hang on for the next segment? Because we need a minute on that. Yeah,
we do.
The debanking bill, I will say this, it would be nice for once to get out in front of a problem before it becomes the problem du jour, which has kind of been the history at times. It would be great to be a leader in that particular area and do something that makes everybody else look at what Mississippi is doing and says, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just have to make it happen. And let me ask you this. I'm just curious, as we're working our way into the break, you've got this blueprint, 10 things on it. What do you think, honestly now, the honest odds, how many of those do you think have a decent chance of getting done this session?
I mean, obviously, if we passed all 10, I would probably do myself out of a job. We would be the most free market state in America, and I would, game over. In reality, we would be very fortunate if we achieved something like half of this list. But any one of these, particularly on school choice, would be a significant win. I would trade everything on this list for real school choice, because if we fix school choice, ultimately we can fix everything else on this list. But let's see.
Douglas Carswell with us in the studio. You got to stop making sense. Some people don't like that, Douglas. They're going to be cross with you. Just be careful.
Bring them on this radio station and ask them tough questions.
Oh, I like that idea. Final segment of the 7 o'clock hour up next. Welcome back. The final segment of the Gallo Show on SuperTalk Mississippi for a Friday morning. Dave Hughes here, Douglas Carswell in the studio. And the last thing on the Mississippi Center for Public Policy's blueprint list, we saved it for its own segment because, well, this may take a minute. The ballot initiative. Have at it.
Well, Mississippi's had a ballot initiative for decades now. What that means is that if enough Mississippians feel really strongly about something, they can sign a petition. If enough people sign a petition in each of the different congressional districts, it leads to a vote involving all Mississippians on whether or not to change the law. And this was a great thing. It was part of direct democracy. It was, I think, part of very much the sort of the Jacksonian idea of American democracy. Unfortunately, though, the Supreme Court ruled, and I hate to say this, but I think they were correct in doing so, that the old system of triggering a ballot initiative had been made redundant because of a change in the number of congressional districts. And I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but it seemed pretty obvious when the Supreme Court made that ruling that what was required was a small adjustment to legislation so that a new ballot initiative could be allowed, taking into account the Supreme Court's ruling. 3 years later, we have seen endless attempts at restoring the ballot initiative denied by people who don't just seem to be concerned about the new way of triggering the initiative, but seem weirdly to be opposed against the whole notion of direct democracy. That seems to be the real issue. They pretend, as they look solemnly at us from their perch in the Senate, that somehow the failure of this legislation to be passed is some sort of random act of nature. But it seems to me that they intentionally don't want a ballot initiative, and I think we need to flush them out. If it's the case that they support the restoration of the ballot initiative, there's a very, very good and sensible proposal being worked on, and they need to support it. If they don't want the ballot initiative because they don't trust the voters and they don't believe in democracy, they need to come out and say so. I think we can't really put up with this much longer.
Well, and that's one thing with the incoming Trump administration. I think it's the hope of a lot of people that we're about to see an era of accountability that's been missing for 4 years now, where things just happen and I don't know how. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier about, shining some light on things.
Look, it's not enough to get elected as a conservative in Mississippi by having the right bumper sticker, by trying to attach yourself to Trump's tailcoats, by posting on social media photographs of you hunting duck. What is required to be a conservative credibly in Mississippi is to deliver legislation that actually empowers people. And part of that, a good place to start would be the restoration of the ballot initiative. If you're not in favor of restoring the ballot initiative, how can you conceivably pretend to be a conservative?
Well, that's kind of the bedrock. And again, it goes back to that same theme that's running through the entire list, freedom of choice.
Yep. The spirit of 1776, you might call it. It works.
Yes. What we need right now, I think, down on the Gulf Coast is a shipment of tea to come in. And then we can get things rolling again.
Don't.
Okay, yeah, I'm bringing up a sore subject. I realize that.
Yeah, we lost the first time. We don't want to rerun that one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Especially, and by the way, you're welcome. It's a personal favor. I haven't brought up what's going on in England right now because I don't like it when your blood pressure gets that high. I worry about you.
Yeah. Do you know, England is an example of what happens when a cultural relativist elite pretending to be conservative runs your country. So-called conservatives have been in charge of that country for 14 years. They pursued a sort of Nancy Pelosi economic agenda, a cultural relativism woke agenda. They turned their eye to the equivalent of DEI as it marched through British institutions, and now look at the state of the country. It's not just an economic mess. It is a country where systematic abuse of young children is ignored because people don't want to tamper with people's cultural sensitivities. Don't let that happen in Mississippi. Make sure your conservatives tackle DEI. Make sure you have conservatives who reject cultural relativism and know on whose side they stand. What happened to England could happen here in 30 years if you allow false conservatives to fail to deliver what conservative voters wanted. British people have voted for conservative governments repeatedly since the days of Margaret Thatcher, and they have been let down by fake conservatives. Don't let that happen here.
And I can feel your blood pressure rising from here, but it's okay. It's understandable. And you make a good point, though, because just like we mentioned Malai down in Argentina as a great laboratory case, unfortunately, we have a laboratory case in the other direction right now as to what the future could hold when you look at England and where it's at the moment. Yep. So excellent point. Excellent way to bring that out. Douglas Carswell, I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you so much.
We could do this for hours.
Anytime you can't find a real guest, I'm always available.
Oh, no, you're at the top of our real guest list, my friend. Don't worry about that. Always enjoy it, and we'll be talking to you throughout the session, I have no doubt.
Wonderful.